Hey, remember in the mid-2000s when we reached peak weebitude by joining the anime club? I mean, the Japanese Media Appreciation Club. And sooner or later, this one dude would come in and try to get us to watch his DVD copy of Higurashi When They Cry that they borrowed from the local library. And of course, our wannabe edgelord asses had grown tired of all the mainstream dreck like Death Note or Ouran High School Host Club, and were hankering for something more quote-unquote mature. So needless to say, this supposedly real anime that promised horror and bloodshed was right up our alley. Yeah. Anyway, repressed memories aside, what exactly is Higurashi? So the year is 1983, and there's this one dude who goes to this school out in the boonies, right? And he's a part of this game club with his inexplicably all-female friends. And while they try to live the idyllic lifestyle of a moe slice of life series, this little town called Hinamizawa had other plans and used
redacted
to force
redacted
into committing heinous murder in the name of
redacted.
Now the thing about Higurashi is that this is not just a horror anime. This is the horror anime. This shit came out like 15 odd years ago, and I swear that if you mention this series to any anime fan nowadays, they will have at least heard of it. Like, this show has transcended from being just a popular anime to becoming a cult classic before ultimately reaching that coveted meme status. Like, I'm sure you guys have seen pictures of that one girl with the cleaver in her hand ready to fuck someone up, right? That's Higurashi. Or maybe you've seen a clip of that one green-haired chick with the crazy eyes laughing like a maniac. Also Higurashi. Or perhaps a couple of your buddies made some inside joke about, fingernails? Higurashi, my dude. Yeah, this was the OG yandere anime, man. You know Gasai ain't got nothing on this bitch. But putting aside its status as a cultural icon, Higurashi is actually a legitimately good horror series. And the reason for that is because all the guts, gore, and dismemberment that we all remember from this show only had that impact because the series bothered to build up the character dynamics and make it meaningful. And I know this isn't strictly an anime thing so much as it is a genre thing, but like, that is ultimately how you do effective horror. The way Higurashi works is that it'll lure you into a false sense of security by making Keiichi have some wholesome fun with his not harem to set the groundwork for testing their friendship. Then when shit hits the fan, we get to really feel for these characters as we watch them fight back against a cursed world that seems destined to end in carnage. And it gets especially crazy when their fate seems to be largely dependent on them overcoming their own personal demons. In other words, they're kind of fucked from the get-go. Now, like I said, this isn't anything new as far as horror goes, but like any good horror, you need at least an inkling of hope to keep the stakes up. And I think this is where Higurashi really shines in that regard. I don't think this is a spoiler, but this is one of those multiple arc kind of series where the timeline resets every few episodes. Meaning we the viewers get the pleasure of seeing our favorite girls self-destruct multiple times while getting strung along by the expectation that maybe, just maybe, things will turn out okay for once. I know I probably made this series sound like it's nothing but torture porn, but that is absolutely not the case. Like, it's not just looking for excuses to make children suffer. The episodes that are 90% dedicated to goofy antics actually do serve a purpose in making you want to root for their success. Granted, it can be tonally jarring at times, and the humor doesn't always hit the mark, but this is the kind of horror anime where the trusting relationships that foster between these kids are just as invaluable as when they're getting hacked to pieces. And before you ask, there are real answers for why Hinamizawa is so fucked up, and they are absolutely worth watching the second season for. So in short, Higurashi When They Cry is a pretty dope series that will simultaneously leave you smiling and utterly traumatized. But like, the thing that baffles me is that by most accounts, this should be a dead fandom, at least for us in the Western Hemisphere. Like, the anime is great and all, but it wasn't exactly masterpiece theater, if you get what I'm saying. I just kinda expected it to be one of those shows where you're like, hey, this is pretty damn good, during the original broadcast, only to forget about it by the following season. So why is there still a market for this show? Why, against all odds, are we getting a reboot of this anime in this oh-so-glorious year of 2020? The obvious answer is that Higurashi is not just an anime. It's actually a well-regarded franchise primarily defined by its long-ass line of visual novel series. And like, I don't really play VNs, man, but I have heard that 7th expansion really killed it with this series. Pun totally intended. Higurashi was apparently so well received that they managed to spawn a manga, CD dramas, light novel series, live action movies, and of course, the anime and subsequent OVAs well after the series' prime. And I'm like, there's gotta be something about this series, man, that must be really accessible. Cause I know fans of Umineko, the other When They Cry series, are probably spinning in their grave right now about how they only got a shitty anime while Higurashi gets a flashy new remake. But really, I think the real reason the Higurashi franchise is still kicking, other than the fact that it's good, is because, well, it just came out at the perfect time. The moe boom had just taken off after the turn of the century, and pretty much every producer wanted a piece of the pie. Unfortunately, the oversaturation of cute anime girls led to a subsequent drop in market value, so you really couldn't get an edge on the competition without some kind of gimmick. And so 7th expansion came in and was all, okay, brace yourselves. Killer schoolgirls. I don't know, man, what kind of losers would be attracted to mentally unstable teenage girls with homicidal tendencies? I don't think it's gonna catch on. There's also the fact that Higurashi came out during the crux of the internet age when watching anime actually became a social activity as opposed to some mark of degeneracy. Higurashi at the time had presented itself as something edgy, dark, and a little perverse, and considering most of us watched this series just past our middle school years, it's really no wonder why we ate this shit up. So ultimately, Higurashi was a case where pretty much everything in the universe lined up in its favor. Even the show's most glaring flaws had something of a positive effect. Like, I know people like to talk shit about Studio Dean and the piss-poor animation they did, but ironically, that kind of became one of Higurashi's most iconic qualities. This isn't the best version of Waifus Gone Wild, but it was the first to do so, and do it competently. And I think the fact that we're getting a so far rock-solid remake/sequel nearly 15 years later without losing much of its core appeal really speaks to something timeless and classical about its particular brand of horror. But whatever, there's your Halloween recommendation for the year. If you decide to watch this series and you don't come out a soulless abomination, then I am happy to announce that you, my friend, are a true anime fan. Oh shit, I forgot to mention, this anime has one of the most bone-chilling OPs I've ever heard. Like, I still get shivers every time I listen to it. Anyway, if you guys like this video and you want to support the growth of this channel, please leave a like, a comment, and hit that subscribe button. Until then, stay tuned!